Hi, my name is Judy and I'm the City Stitcher, and welcome to my Flosstube channel. Today is Sunday, March the 27th, and it is a mostly sunshiny day today. Temperatures are decent, so the sunroom is nice. In fact, we're getting to that point in the afternoon where when I originally started out this morning getting things pulled together, I was like, so I was having the debate because yesterday it was definitely sunshiny and the sunroom was glorious. It was like short sleeve weather in here. So the debate today was whether or not I was going to wear short sleeves again. But of course it was cloudy this morning and a little overcast, which seems to have mostly burned off. So I decided this morning that I was not wearing a short sleeve, and now when I'm now ready to film, I'm going like the room is warming up again. So if I get a little glowy on you, you know why. This is a channel about cross stitching, so if you're new, if you're stopping by for the first time, thanks for spending some time with me, and I hope you enjoy what you see. And as always, very, very grateful to those of you who return faithfully and watch my videos and watch the stitching journey that I'm on. So thank you so much for coming back. The comments last week, thank you again for the comments. Had a new viewer last week who had just left a comment, a cautionary note on my infamous pill organizers, is that sometimes these lids open easier than you may think. So certainly if you are thinking about using this for needle storage, just make sure, cautionary note, just make sure that you are watching your lids. So I don't know if it's brand specific or if the tightness, like, so this one's got a distinct click when it closes. So I don't know over time whether, you know, that the strength of the clasp sort of loses its grip or whatever. But certainly if you're storing needles, caution, just make sure when you're throwing it into things or something like that, because that's something I would do. Just have a quick little check and make sure that your lids are actually firmly closed. So thank you for the cautionary note. That's a good safety tip, and we all know safety first. All right, with that, let's get into my stitching, because it will tie in with some of the comments. That's not true. I was going to do this. There were a few things about Nashville that I did not include in last week's video, and it just had to do with the fact that after I showed the haul for 2 people, it was already a lengthy video, and I just went, we're done with Nashville now. So a couple of things about Nashville. Don't forget that a lot of the charts that came out from Nashville are not limited edition. So, you know, I have appreciated watching a couple of Flosstubers this week who are kind of going like, I have my list, and, you know, over time I will work on my list. And that's absolutely true. There certainly are things that I've seen in the Nashville releases that I like, but I've just had those moments, and again, because I'm trying to be, you know, not buying all the things. Sort of saying, you know, I made the comment around a tasket from Rosewood Manor that while I really liked it, you know, I have a lot of Rosewood Manors already in my stash that I have not stitched, or so haven't even started, let alone getting close to finishing. So, you know, before I add another pattern to my stash, I was going to, you know, my goal is to get more Rosewood Manors finished before I add another one. And you know, we all know that's not going to happen in 2 seconds. So, you know, again, it's not limited edition. That changes things. It's not one that I think is at risk of going out of print soon, purely because, you know, it's a new release. So according to me, I've got time. So there is that. So, okay, way back, there was an LNS that was where I live. It has now closed. they were the store that originally went to Nashville, and in the good old early days, certainly where I live, this is not necessarily true for everybody's LNS. Um, this is the days before social media and all that kind of stuff, and so you had no idea what was being released. The shop owners, I don't think necessarily knew. Certainly I, as a retail customer, had no idea of what was coming. And my LNS that went to Nashville at that point in time had, as many shops do, had a Nashville market day when they got back. It was a Saturday. And I remember having to get up early because the store would open at 9, that I would need to be at the shop about 8:20, 8:30 to line up. So there, to get into the shop, there would be a lineup. It was a small shop, didn't have a lot of, moving around space, and because you didn't know what was coming and they could only bring back so much, there was a lot of excitement, and I and my friends would dutifully go, and we were part of the lineup on that Saturday morning, so we could rush in and get the things. Yeah, there was a lot of excitement. It's the excitement these days with social media is that we get to see them in advance, which I actually think is very beneficial to the shops because they have a better idea of what their customers are ordering. And again, as I mentioned last week, every shop has a different customer base. And so the most popular top 5 charts for shop A versus shop B versus shop C can be entirely different or somewhat different, and everything in between. So I appreciate that it lets the shops, as far as I'm concerned, it lets the shops be a little more efficient in their purchasing while they're there, because they already have pre-orders and they have a sense of what their customer base is looking for. So I appreciate that. I would like the designers to put out their previews a little bit earlier than they did this year. I feel like they came out a little late, that I was a little flurrying towards the end to get my pre-order into my shop, but whatever. The other thing is, even if your LNS did not attend Nashville Market, generally, the patterns that came out for Nashville are not exclusive. Some of them were exclusive. The exclusive really only meant that they were exclusive to the shops that attended Nashville for some, it could be anywhere from 30, I think, to 60 days. I do like the fact that it does take some time for the designs to arrive at the distributors, so that other shops can order them. So it's good that the other shops can still get them. I do appreciate the fact that there hopefully is a gap, because for the shops that make the effort, spend the money in time, travel, booking their hotel rooms, etc., I feel like they should be given sort of some preferential treatment because they have invested that time, that portion of their budget to physically attending market. I acknowledge that that's not necessarily in the cards for all shops, but I would actually like the patterns not to go to the distributors quite as quickly, just because I really want to reward those shops that make that effort so that they can actually make their money back. But anyway, the last of the Nashville thoughts. Okay, I'm looking at my clock on my video going, okay, that wasn't too bad. All right, now we're really going to get into stitching. So I only got 2 votes on my window issue last week, so I don't know whether that means that you didn't care. It was just like, do whatever you want for the windows, which is totally fine too. Clearly, my cottages are not, shouldn't necessarily be the highlight of anybody else's concerns, but Anyway, so here is the March Cottage from Country Cottage Needleworks. So I did finish it this week, so it is fully finished. Well, it's finished from a stitching perspective. There we go. Let's do this, because clearly something's happening with the sun over here. So what I ended up doing is I did end up putting the back stitching in all of the windows. I ended up using the pecan from the roof, which of course it was also used in the door, so I feel like it's at least a cohesive brown across them. I did put my initials and the year, which I'm doing down here in the bottom right for all of them. Well, all of them so far, all 3 of them. So March is complete as of this week. Again, I am doing this on a 32 count Icelandic Blue linen from Whitchelt, using the called for colors, other than I changed the DMC 957 to DMC 605, and I changed the yellow from DMC, I want to say it's 744, yeah, 744 to DMC 745. So I just toned them down a little bit. Yeah, from a distance you can't really see that. I just felt that the other colors were a little too intense. So there you go. There's March. So far this year I'm doing quite well, because my goal is to get each cottage stitched in its month. So far we are at the end of March, and I have been successful on that goal. So that goes into the books. All right. I worked on my Lent project, which is the Thea Gouverneur kit for Jerusalem. So I purchased this as a kit. I am using the kit materials. The linen that came as the kit, the floss that came as a kit, which we'll be talking about. Yeah, so I feel like it was a pretty good week this week, and you'll see when I haul this across that we're living in the land of weirdness now. Okay, there we go. Get a little bit of some backing here. All right, so yes, we're having that problem that it's getting a little too tall to fit in here comfortably, which means great progress. So I can officially say that all of page 3, I can't even reach around to do this very well. I need one of Shelia's pointers. All of page 3 is complete, including the back stitching. So all of that got done this week. So that was good. The last time you saw it, the highest point over here was sort of at a level with the top of the cross. So everything above that, that's new this week. So page 3 is complete. I have decided that my decision to do the back stitching on each page, so when I finish all of the cross stitching, to do all of the back stitching on that page is a very, very, very good idea. After finishing this page this week, I went, okay, yep, you called that one right. You would not do well if you had to come back and do this at the end. I will say, Thea Gouverneur charts are not good about their backstitching instructions. They're not. And as I was working on my backstitching, like I literally sort of went like, I don't even know what color to use for that. There are no errors, there are no anything. So I ended up joining a Facebook group for Thea Gouverneur, and searching for people who'd worked on Jerusalem. Not surprisingly, there was some commentary in there about people struggling with the backstitching due to a lack of backstitching instructions. So you see that there's backstitching, but there is no symbol indicated anywhere on the chart for that particular section. I'm going to lean back, see if I can't do a better job of getting this in without me having to feel so weird. Anyway, so sometimes the answer is apparently you just need to make it up. That really is the answer, even from the people in the Facebook group that I joined. There was someone in the Facebook group who had commented that they had reached out to the Thea Gouverneur organization. So there is an email address on the kits, and they got absolutely no response. And there were a couple of people who chimed in, sort of went, yeah, they just don't respond. So even if you have a question about their chart, or I would say if something isn't quite right in your kit, they're not responsive, which I think is unfortunate. They have made some comments publicly, sort of, that they won't give you the DMC color numbers for the threads that come, because are having problems with people pirating their charts, which I acknowledge is an issue, and I don't want that to happen to them. I do say it's a bit of a disservice to those of us who are purchasing it legitimately, that we're struggling. Anyway, there was one lady in the group who made a comment that sort of said, she's worked on multiple Thea Gouverneur kits. She likes her coverage to be thicker, to be more denser. So I'm doing this on the antique white linen, whether 35, 36, one of those two that came in the kit. And so someone made a comment that they like better coverage than the 1/2 that I'm doing. Although, again, when you look at it up close, you can see some of those gaps. But again, it's the stand back and look, right? So I can look at this in the screen as I'm recording this, going like, when you stand back, I think the coverage is just fine. I think it's just fine. So as someone who likes denser coverage, the first thing she does anytime she gets a kit is sit down with her DMC color card and goes through all of the writing down what all the colors are, because she knows that the kit will be coming with half the amount of floss that she's going to need to do her project. I will also say, from the people in the group, there are several people who commented that there are some colors in this kit that they ran out of. They do make a comment sort of saying in the kit, because I was looking for some backstitching instructions that didn't exist. So I was having to go back and read all of it and going, maybe you've just missed something. Because some of the backstitching I've done on this page, there were absolutely no indication as to what color they should be done on. And again, one of the people in the Facebook group is sometimes you just have to take a magnifier and hold up, the picture and see if you can't figure it out. And I just went, sorry, anywho. Anyway, so, and it does say that, it will be sparing, it kind of implies that you will have just enough to get the project done, which is a little bit unfortunate. So as you can see, I have started moving over here onto page 4. There's 3 different colors that I've already put into page 4 so I have done my stitching on this for today, Sunday. So between Saturday night and today, I've put in my length of thread for today. But again, like, there's 3 different colors. You can see how sporadic this is. Like, this is not one of those ones where you go like you've got some decent chunks of color until you get into, I'm looking forward to the building that's coming up next, because there's some good chunks of color in there. But again, so it will be interesting. But I have made a note of, that several people have worked on this kit and have said we ran out of some of the floss that came with the kit. So note to self, I might actually I won't do it while I'm doing my Lent stitching, but I have it on my to-do list over the course of, over the course of the rest of this year, that I should probably sit down with those and actually figure out what the DMC colors are for when I run out of some of the colors. So it's better to do it when you have time and leisurely time to do that, as opposed to, oh my goodness, I'm running out and having a panic. The other thing that I want to talk about is the fact that the kit comes with DMC threads, and so the metallics that come in the kit are the DMC metallics. Okay, after finishing, I am doing a terrible job, the Dome of the Rock, one of the lines that occurred to me, and I did say it to a friend of mine, and you're never going to believe it's coming out of my mouth, but here it comes. It made me reflect fondly on the days of the Nativity. Yeah, I just said that. I said that out loud. I've used the DMC metallic, but I'm having that moment. I would say whatever I was using for it must not have been a dense stitch, because working with the DMC metallic on this, I don't like it. I greatly don't like it. I will take Krynic over DMC metallic every time. So I have finished. Okay, I'm gonna roll this up a little bit just so we can get in. So we can get in here. All right, there we go. Okay, so a huge chunk of this, you can see it a little bit in the camera. So all of this is pretty much full coverage with the DMC metallic, and it is a bear to work with. Now my problem is that I tend to stitch as a cross-country color completer. So if you're watching this and you're going like, thank you for saying that sentence, that makes I don't understand what any of that means. Really what it means is, so some people approach this because it tends to be pretty full coverage, that they sort of work in 10 by 10 blocks. I, of course, pick a color and stitch the length of thread. So cross country, so which is why you see these sporadic, right? There's no solid coverage yet. So that's what cross country is. Color completer is that I'm just sort of, I take my length of thread and I finish all of that thread. I don't park it, which is a whole other discussion, which it's coming, hang on here a bit. So that tends to be how I approach my stitching, which meant when I started down here, I'd worked on at least one of the metallics and had finished all of it. And then I'd done a couple. I think there are about 5 colors of metallic in here. So I'd done 2 or 3, and must have been 2, because I did 3 colors this week, because I worked on it on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, which was my plan, right? Work on a metallic, give myself a day off of metallic where I was going to work on back stitching, come back and do metallic, blah, blah, blah. And that's how I got through it. So I was finishing the cross stitching while working on the metallic and the back stitching. This was just the filling, and certainly here, by the time I got into like this center color here, it was just awful. Awful, 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 awful. So what I have learned, so I'm glad that I have finished all of the metallic on the Dome of the Rock and all of its back stitching, and I'll hold this up closer so that you can see. We'll talk about the back stitching in a minute. So I'm glad that I did this and I did all of it, because if I had only done to the bottom of the page and had this to do, that would have put me right off. So I'm glad that I finished all of the roof of the Dome of the Rock and its metallics, because it has taught me a lot. Step 1. I am now, this week, I'm going to make the effort to try and convert the DMC Metallics into a Rainbow Gallery Petite Treasure Braid. There's a lot more metallic in my future. Let me just put this down here for a second. So my next church, I think this is the Church of Mary Magdalene, but don't quote me on that one. I think it's the Church of Mary Magdalene. And not surprisingly, all of these, the roofs to these minaret looking things are done in the metallics. And I looked at them and went, ugh, here it comes. Anyway, so I've finished all of the metallics in the roof of the Dome of the Rock, which is great, because then that means all of that is same, it's color consistent, etc., etc., etc. My goal for this week is to take all of the metallics that come with the kit, convert them to a Rainbow Gallery Petite Treasure Braid, and use the Petite Treasure Braid for the rest of the metallics. I have decided that I will only use the DMC metallic if I really can't find anything that I'm happy with. So check back next week, because that is for sure on my to-do list to get done this week. But I was like, this was painful. It was very painful. All right, so here comes a little bit about the back stitching. Again, I'm going to hold it up close. I'm probably not going to be able to see anything. So you can see some of the back stitching in there. I have done back stitching in certain places where at the end of the day I went, you can't even see it. And I will say, there we go. I really need a pointer, like over here. So this back stitching is done with the DMC metallic, which was awful to do, to the point where I ended up, so normally when I'm doing back stitching for every square on the graph, I actually do one stitch. With the DMC metallic, it was just so awful to work with. I ended up sort of doing more long stitches than true back stitching. So long stitches as in, you know, it's going to be so hard to tell. That if you had like back stitching that showed on the pattern that sort of went over 11, let's use 9 because it works better. So if it was over 9 squares, normally if I were doing how I normally do back stitching, I would have done 9 stitches to do that back stitching. The DMC metallic was so awful to work with. I ended up, so 9 would work really well for me because I would just look at that and go, okay, I'm going to break this into groups of 3, and I'm going to do a long stitch over 3 squares and then 3 squares and 3 squares to get my 9. So it was just, yeah, it was very painful to do. There's a whole bunch of back stitching like all along here along the bottom, and even in real life I go, you can barely see it. So quite a bit of back stitching on this particular area. Some of it I would say was worth it. Some of it I would say was not worth it. So anyway. So what I have learned, I'm going to convert it to Rainbow Gallery. When I go to work on the roofs on this next page, the other thing, because this gets so dense, my goal is to actually, when I do these next roofs, really do them using the parking method. So we'll talk about that when we get there, and see how that works, because I want to work on them starting at the top, working down and filling it all in as I work my way down, because of how dense the metallic is in that area. So that was another lesson learned this week. Cross-country color completing in here made this very, very painful. So if you have the Jerusalem kit and you're planning on keeping it with the DMC, the words of advice I have to you, make sure you start at the top and fill in solidly as you're working your way down. Do not do the color completion method that I used, because with the DMC metallics, it was just awful to do. It was just awful to do. So I'm glad that I stuck with it and I got all of the roof done, because it's done. The other thing, so clearly all of this part of the roof is on from the page below it, technically page 8. And because I'm using Markup RXP, I know that I already have my first 915 stitches into this next page. I can also tell you that my grandiose sporadic stitching over here on page 4 equates to 128 stitches. So that's where I am on Jerusalem. It's been an interesting week, but so the most important thing is I'm thrilled that page 3 is complete, and I think it's looking great. A little bit of a painful journey this week, but I'm really happy with the end result. And I've learned things that I will apply to the very next page. So the other thing that I was planning on doing, and we're going to see if it works out, is I've been using Markup RXP, which is an app for Apple products. It's like the Apple version of Pattern Keeper-esque. So it's not Pattern Keeper, but it works similarly from my understanding. And I will say that it has made a huge difference in my stitching. So I think I'm getting a lot more accomplished. It is struggling with the symbols because there are so many symbols that are so much alike. So you still have to, even when you pick a symbol, you kind of still have to go through the area where you're stitching and around in the design just to check to see whether they've actually picked it up correctly, or you might be missing some squares that have that symbol. It might be picking up squares where it thinks it's the same symbol, but it's not. And again, I talked about this, so the symbols that Thea Gouverneur uses in her patterns, as far as I'm concerned, are terrible. I acknowledge it makes it harder for the people who are trying to pirate her design, but holy smokes, I get you're trying to prevent piracy of your patterns, but it makes it really problematic for your stitchers who are buying it legitimately. So for example, Markup RXP struggles in trying to differentiate, there is an up arrow that has a solid triangle at the top of the arrow, but there's also an up arrow that has a empty triangle at the top. And so sometimes Markup RXP struggles to differentiate between those two, because I've scanned in the pattern to get it into Markup RXP. It is not an electronic pattern that I'm uploading directly into the app. So it struggles with that. I totally get it. So I still am having to do some sort of monitoring of what is being selected versus what isn't being selected and making sure. And I will say I didn't get it 100% because, as usual, you've got sort of these sporadic ones, and then there's one over here. And I forgot to check over there. So some of the work that I was doing on Saturday was just sort of going, okay, what have I got left? And I know that some of them I had already done that symbol, but I missed 3 in other spots. But as I was doing those areas, I was like, there were none other of that color around it to do. So I think it's more efficient than when I was trying to find the symbols myself. The other great thing is when you have the symbol selected in Markup RXP, it does give you that ability to sort of zoom out and sort of look at where it's selected and pick your path. So for someone like me who is doing cross-country color completion-esque, it's giving me that ability to sort of figure, look at look at everything that's been selected and figuring out the path how I'm going to stitch it, which I think also makes it for a little more efficient thread usage, as we go through that. So that's good. Page 3 is complete. My plan was that now that I'm working on a new page, I was going to use Pattern Keeper for the next page, because then it would give me the ability to compare the two apps. Pattern Keeper is only available for non-Apple products, so Android products, so whether it's Samsung or whatever, you all know it, a not Apple product. Somewhere you get Pattern Keeper off of like the Google store. So I think you can get it on Kindle Fires and stuff like that. But Pattern Keeper is only available on non-Apple systems. markuprxp, I think, is only available for Apple. So I've used markuprxp so far. I started using it when I started working on my Lent project, so March the 3rd, for second or third, whatever that Wednesday was. And so now that I've completed page 3, I was going to use Pattern Keeper for the next page. So that was part of my project last night, was I was trying to upload my PDF file that I had used, which is how I got it into markuprxp, and get it uploaded into Pattern Keeper. So far, I have not been able to get it in there. So one of the issues is this is not an electronic pattern. This is a scan that I have done. And there is a possibility that I may not be able to get it into Pattern Keeper at all. So I'm planning on trying to do something with Pattern Keeper so I can compare and contrast how markuprxp functions versus Pattern Keeper. But at this juncture, I have not been able to load my pattern into Pattern Keeper. And they do say that, like, if you're in Pattern Keeper and you're looking at their frequently asked questions, and they've got a help section about, if you're having trouble getting your pattern loaded, there is a possibility that it may not be able ever to load into Pattern Keeper because of the complexity of the symbols, that it's coming in from a scan, etc., etc. So there is a possibility that I will not be able to get my pattern into Pattern Keeper. So check back later. Like I say, so my goal for April is to try to do something in Pattern Keeper so I can compare and contrast. So, that'll be a topic for later on, towards the end of April or early May. But so far I can say one of the differences is one of them I was able to load it relatively easily. So I was able to get it into markuprxp quite reasonably. So far I've tried a couple of times. I can't get it to load, and I may never be able to get it to load. So check back later, and I'll let you know how that one's going on. All right, so that's Jerusalem. So best thing this week, page 3 is complete. The Dome of the Rock is complete. The backstitching is complete, and I'm moving on to page 4. The other thing that happened this week with Jerusalem is, as I mentioned at the beginning, I'm getting to that point where, okay, I'm a little bit tired of the project. And I allowed myself that flexibility that may happen to me, and it's better to give yourself a little bit of a break than to try to keep plowing forward, because that's a lesson that I learned from the Nativity. Now, it is my Lent piece, so I have decided I've made that decision from a planning perspective that this is my Lent piece that I'm working on every day during the season of Lent, right up to and technically including Easter Sunday, although Lent is over by Easter Sunday. That's what I'm doing for Lent. But I am getting a little bit tired of seeing it, although I'm happy with my progress. So I'm allowing my flexibility that I still have to get a minimum of one length of thread into the project every day, except for that Saturday where I only got like the 8 stitches, whatever the number was. It was a pathetic small number. But I have allowed myself the flexibility this week to work on something else. Okay, besides finishing up the March cottage. So I hauled out my Deb's Winter Biscornu. So this is a pattern from the Winter 2021 Punch Needle and Primitive Stitcher magazine. And again, because my parents gifted me my all-inclusive electronic subscription to that. That's where I got it from. I have not printed out the front cover, but you'll get the gist. I am doing this on a 32 count opalescent linen, following the instructions. So where you saw it last is all I had was this lighter blue sort of curly Q thing here. So that's what I had the last time you saw it. So since then, this week, I've got in these 3 snowflakes here, filled in more of the light blue over here. Now, what's missing in these 2 is that I need to fill in the light blue stitches in these corners. Well, 2 corners in the center. So that's going to come in here because I need to do light blue again to fill up in these 2. There's a whole series of Smyrnas that sort of, there's 4 Smyrnas that sort of go into the 4 corners of each snowflake, which I'm going to do at the end once I get the cross stitching done. But, you know, again, decent progress on this week. So I got all 3 of these complete, well, the darker blue completed on those. Each one of those is 160 stitches. So again, because I actually did import this into markuprxp. That's how I know that number, 160 dark blue stitches in each of those. So this may be one where I pull this into Pattern Keeper and see how it does. I don't know. It's a much simpler pattern. There's only a couple of symbols on here. We'll see how we do. But yeah, so I made some progress on that. I know everybody's talking about spring and blah, blah, blah. I really am going to see if I can't get this knocked out in the next little bit. So, so this is side 1 of the Biscornu. Side 2 goes on the other side of where that basting line is, because I'm following the instructions from the magazine. So the downside for me, and you may be able to tell a little bit, is because I followed the instructions in the magazine and I cut my piece of linen to the size that they told me to cut it to, and I don't stitch in hand. This does not fit nicely even onto my 6x6 Q-snap. I don't like it. So I have had to resort to using a hoop. So you can see some hoop marks. So I am having to use my hoop while I'm stitching on this. So note to self, next time you're working on a Biscornu, maybe don't follow the instructions on how small to cut the fabric, because you're not going to necessarily enjoy that part. So I've learned things this week. Anyway, so onto the hoop. Again, happy with my progress. And again, this provided, particularly compared to the number of colors that I'm dealing with in Jerusalem, this made for a really great contrast because there's only 2 colors, easy to sit down and work on some stuff and knock some stuff out. So yeah, happy with that project. I've got plans for the rest of this week, which we'll get into in a bit. So that was my sort of next project that I was hauling out to give myself a little bit of a break from Jerusalem. I have also made progress on my infamous sampler of stitches by the Drawn Thread, which I'm doing as a stitch along hosted by Sarah from the Stitchin' Mommy. And all right, that sailed really far. It's way across the room. You won't be able to come back and talk about that for sure. Anyway, so I made decent progress on this week. So what did I get done? So I got all of E. So E is entirely finished now. So I filled in my last 2 stitches in here, which means that I am now officially into, I have 4 colors of mauve that I am using. The pattern only calls for 3. I now have 4. I've used all 4 of the colors that I have in my palette. As you can see, I have not made my decision. I haven't fixed this, and I have not finished this on F. I have also not filled in my light mauve stitches here because I was having some debates with myself. So the other thing that is true to form is I've now changed the pattern a little bit more. So this Florentine stitch here, in the pattern, it only calls for 3 colors: the dark mauve, the light mauve, and the very light mauve. But now that I've made some decisions about how to fill this in, I've got 4 colors going. I looked at the spacing on the pattern, and I looked at it and I said, you have enough room there that you can add a 4th row of this stitch. And so I added that in. So instead of the 3 that you see on your pattern, I have adjusted the spacing so that I could add a 4th row so that I have all 4 of the mauves in there. The interesting thing is this, I don't remember the name of this stitch. And again, so I think I've made my decision. This is going to get ripped out, this, and probably get stitched with the Soie Perlee or this. So for sure not the Soie 103 because I don't like how it's looking. And I haven't done this stitch because I have to decide what to do there. Again, technically the called for is to use the Soie 103. I did not make the decision on what I was going to use for the light mauve that's going in here, because I looked ahead to my next chart, which I would like to show you what, you know, GH and I look like, except the patterns are on the opposite side of the room now. So it's actually used in this next chart here. And so one of my tasks for tonight is to sort of haul out sort of these colors again and look at them and make some of my decisions. Now, it doesn't have to be consistent. Just because I make a decision for what the contrast color is going to be here for F, when it gets used over here, I want to say that it's also used in G, I don't necessarily have to use the same choice for that one. And that's okay too. I'm already adjusting the pattern, and now I have, you know, 4 colors of mauve going when there's only 3 called for. So none of that is a surprise to any of you who have watched my channel before. So I'm getting close. I only have this 1 stitch left here to do, and the accent color here on the F, and redo this stitch back here in D. And then this chart will be complete. So hopefully certainly by the end of tonight, this chart will be complete and I will have started on G. So G has quite a bit of stitching in it, so it'll be interesting to see how much I get accomplished. When I look at the calendar for where I should be for the stitch along to be keeping up with it technically, this is my first week that I should be working on G, and I will be working on G tonight. So I think my plan, again, because my plan on how I'm approaching this stitch along is that every Sunday night when I'm stitching, my stitching is devoted to sampler of stitches to try to keep up with it. And I think I'm doing okay. Not quite 100% there, but again, given that this is a restart, I feel like I'm doing pretty well. So I'm happy with my outcome. I'm happy with my decisions so far. I'm doing a terrible job of posting on Instagram because I keep forgetting to take a picture. But when I finished this, I took a picture, so I have one ready to load up this week. So there will be posting on Instagram this week. So there's my sampler of stitches coming along pretty good. Things to talk about on that one coming up. All right. Before we get into Stashquisitions and the topic, let's talk about plans. Quick little thing for plans this week. So Lent stitching continues this week. I am planning on trying to give myself a little bit of a break that my minimum will continue to be that I need to get 1 length of thread into Jerusalem every day. But after that, I can choose to do more stitching on Jerusalem, or I can move on to another project. So whether it's Deb's Winter Biscornu, which is factoring into plans this week, I also have pulled something else out to be that sort of other piece that I work on this week. So check back next week and see, well, check back and see if I end up stitching it or not. I've pulled it out. So it's almost ready to go. So that's one of the options in there. April 1st is arriving this week, which means, of course, I will be starting the April cottage on April 1st. We'll see how long that takes, and we'll talk about that as well in just a second. So that's the concept of the plans for this week. I will say the other thing that I've decided, so this is my second year of doing Jerusalem for my Lent stitching, although I'm using a different rotation this year. I can confidently say I will not be working on Jerusalem for Lent next year. I've made that decision. In my 5-year stitching plan, I can also tell you Jerusalem should be coming out later again this year, just so that I can make more progress on it. But I have made the decision for sure. For sure, I will not be working on Jerusalem for my Lent piece next year. Not that I don't like it, but 2 Lents in a row with 2 different rotations, I'm done with stitching that particular chart for Lent so far. Lent goes on for a really long time, it turns out. I know you'd think I would know that by now, but apparently it's something I need to, learn. Anyway, so those are my plans for this next week. Stashquisitions. So Stashquisitions also tie into the topic for this week, which is let's talk the craft connection. And it ties into the story and what I was doing last weekend. So here's hopefully an abbreviated version of what I was doing last weekend. A friend of mine called on Wednesday evening to say, we'd been having a chat on some music things earlier than that, to say that a funeral that she had been asked to sing for, family friend of hers, had passed away, but they were not able to, they were having problems finding a pianist to play for the funeral, to the point where they were through 8 pianists that she knew, none of whom were able to play for this funeral last Saturday in Edmonton. So it would require travel on my part. And so she kind of phoned and said, I know you'd said like anything you can do to help. And it was really kind of like, would you be willing to drive to Edmonton to play for a funeral? So I said yes. At that point, my line is when people end up where I'm the pianist request, we know we're pretty far down the line. I tend not to be in the top 5 pianists that get called unless it's someone that I personally know. And so for her, she's just like, I'm having a really hard time. And so I said, yes, I could drive up to Edmonton and play for this funeral. It's, her husband kind of laughed. He said, like, this is a once in a lifetime thing. There's only one funeral for any given person. And I don't like the concept of having someone's, now that we're able to have funerals, not having somebody's funeral sort of turn out the way that the family would like it. So that's me. And so I said, yes, I was willing to drive to Edmonton to play for this funeral. So that meant several hours of travel, both up, driving up there and coming back, which I did all on the same day, which was my choice. Also because I had something that I needed to do on Sunday, as well as filming. But anyway, so I drove up to Edmonton, and I, of course, graciously said, well, if I'm traveling out of town, there is a needlework shop in Edmonton that is open to the public, and it is called the Craft Connection. And I went, so if I'm driving up to Edmonton to play for a funeral, I might as well go to a needlework shop while I'm there. So that is the topic for this week. So that also ties into, because I don't go generally don't go to shops and not walk out with something. So I went to the Craft Connection. It was great. So we'll talk about the store itself in just a bit, but I'm going to show you my haul from the Craft Connection right now. Alrighty, because I'm looking at my stack. So what did I end up getting from the Craft Connection? So let's start with some of the lighter ones. So I picked up some floss. So I picked up 4 different Weeks Dye Works. What did I get? I got Kris's Bonbon, Chestnut, Roasted Figs, and Rust, which, you know, technically I don't. So I picked up those browns. I know, and you're probably looking at me going, why did you pick up a range of browns? Well, because as we're discovering as I'm working my way through the cottages of the month, I'm struggling with my brown choices. So I figured it was always helpful to have some extra browns in my stash. Quite frankly, these are not going into my thread stash. These are all going into my project bag for the Cottage of the Month series. I'm just throwing them into that bag and going so that they are readily available for the next time I'm struggling with a brown decision. So that's why I got those. Well, we're talking about Weeks Dye Works. It was interesting. If you think back to when I finished up my Choose Joy by My Big Toe, and I talked about that I used a little bit of this highly variegated Bethlehem from Weeks Dye Works, and I made the comment at that point in time that this is an old Bethlehem. New Bethlehem does not necessarily look like this. So anytime it's default. Since I was there, I was looking at their floss. I went, I might as well see what their Bethlehem looks like. So I'm just going to use this one instead because I think it gives, it's not going to look great compared to anything. So I did pick up a couple more skeins, and we'll see, because compared to some of the Bethlehem I've seen, this is a not bad comparison. I have been in one of my LNSs here and looked at their Bethlehem, and it looked like really different to the point where it's like it wasn't a colorway I would enjoy. But the Craft Connection had some skeins of Bethlehem, and they were not bad. They're not, and again, so this will give you a little bit of the difference in how new Bethlehem looks compared to old Bethlehem. So you can see a little bit that, you know, some of the colors are the same way, but they've added sort of more of the lighter shades into the way that Bethlehem is currently being dyed. So I don't know whether that is because the dye has changed, their process has changed, I don't know. But at least I looked at it and I went, well, this is not too bad. Like I say, I've seen versions of Bethlehem where it's a lot lighter, to the point where I was like, I don't like Bethlehem, or I certainly don't like those skeins of Bethlehem. So when I saw that they had a couple of skeins that were actually not too bad of new Bethlehem, I picked them up anyway, just to add into the collection. I still like old Bethlehem better, but these ones were not bad. But that gives you a sense of the difference. Yeah, this bleaches it out too much. This gives you a sense of what the difference is between old Bethlehem and new Bethlehem from Weeks Dye Works. So I picked those up. I picked up, so from the Gentle Art, I picked up a couple of skeins of wrought iron, which on camera, they're probably going to look pretty black. But I will say in real life, they're more of a dark tealy blue, which I thought was interesting. And again, consistency of colors in hand-dyed fibers these days is a little bit interesting. So this is a little bit different, and we always know my tendency is to go more blue than true black when I'm heading into these colorways. They had some skeins of this, so I picked those up. The interesting thing about what they're doing with the Gentle Art, because of course, like everyone else, we know that the Gentle Art is really struggling to keep up with what they're manufacturing, and that certainly for the Gentle Art, there are colorways that have been out of stock across the board for quite a long period of time. And it's not unique to the stores up here in Canada. It's certainly occurring across stores in the US as well. So the interesting thing about how they've got their Gentle Art is they have actually put a purple tag on the peg for the colors that have been out of stock for at least a year. So when you're looking at their Gentle Art rack, if you see a purple tag, up right off the bat, that says to you, this color has not been in stock for at least a year, which means they have no idea if and when they're going to be getting it. And as the lady in the shop said, really what we're saying to you is if you see a purple tag and you were looking for that color, we're really recommending choose a different color. So I thought from a visual assist for their customers, I thought that was really fantastic. It's just, they've got straight up a color tag on there that says, we don't have this color and we have not had this color for at least a year. And that's saying something. So it was interesting, and there was quite a few purple tags on that rack, I have to say. So again, for me as someone, you know, I know about the supply chain, I acknowledge it, all that kind of stuff. It wasn't new to me, but it was an interesting visual for me, because certainly the LNS that is currently open to in-store shopping where I live is not using that method, but it was really great because it just gave you that visual where you got to look at the rack and go like, there's a lot of colors that have been out of stock for at least 12 months. So that was interesting. It was an interesting visual, and I appreciated that they did that. And again, I think it's a really good assist for their customers to say, choose a different color, because who knows what the deal is with this if we're ever getting it, and we certainly don't have a timeline for it. So I thought that was great. The other colors that I picked up, and you're going to have a little bit of a chuckle, some classic Colorworks, steamed broccoli, amethyst, and blooming crocus. And again, I know I have amethyst and blooming crocus already in my stash. I will tell you that this amethyst is very different from the amethyst I have in my stash. I was looking at it and going, that's really different. So these three are very specific because these play into my Cottage of the Month series. And again, because I was looking ahead towards, you know, what's coming up in the next couple of months for my Cottage of the Month series, I had these color names in my head already, and I was looking at, you know, because, you know, I've got some charts of colors and things like that that relate to that series. So we'll talk a little bit more about these next week, because these are certainly going to play into my April Cottage of the Month. So that's why these ended up coming home. And again, even though I know that I have these two colors in my stash, it played into some decision making, and we'll talk about that next week. All right. What else did I pick up? So we're getting into some funner things here, a little less standard. So they had a series of buttons to sew on to things. So I picked up this packet of, just looking around, let's take this off. Snowflakes. So different sizes and designs of snowflakes to just sew onto your project. So I was looking at these and went, you know, so if you had a design that had a lot of snowflakes and they were really annoying you and you didn't want to stitch them, I thought this would make a really great option because it's a whole bunch of them that you could just choose to sew these on instead of stitching those snowflakes from the design. So I thought that was a great option. I don't know where exactly this is going to go, but since I was up there and since I saw them, I picked up this packet. Again, they also had these tiny, tiny little white buttons. And this I got specifically because of, I've already forgotten the name. You know, last week I talked about the new Jeanette Douglas that I figured out my colorway for. It's Quaker something. Anyway, that one. So the chart comes with those small brown buttons. So I looked at these and went, I think these are the same size. And these are white, and I think these will go with my colorway better. So I picked them up. So yes, again, these were not egregiously expensive. So when you're in the store and you see them, you pick them up. So I picked those up. I picked up an 11 by 11 Q snap grime guard. Looks like this. So I know, and again, I know that the selection of colorways, you know, for my LNSs when they order them, like when you can get them, or whoever they're ordering them from, like you kind of get the colorways you get, so you just never know. And I certainly have been in my shops where I look at them and go, like, they're okay, but I don't like the fabric. And I don't want something that I look and go like, I don't like that fabric. So again, light blue and gray, plaid, that says, that was one. So I picked up one of those just to add into my stash. So I certainly have multiple 11 by 11 Q snaps. So it just gave me some flexibility to choose something pretty to add as my grime guard for my Q snaps. I picked up a needle minder. So this is from Kirkland Design Studio. So I haven't seen Kirkland needle minders in my LNSs where I live. So I thought it was nice to see something else, and so I picked this one up. Okay, I have to read it this way before I show you. I could stop buying cross stitch, but I'm not a quitter. Which I thought was very me. So I picked that up. And as all the other Flosstubers say, I wasn't able to use this until I showed it on Flosstube. So now that I've showed it, I can put it on a project. I picked up some fabric. I picked up, and again, because I looked at what they had available. So this is a 28 count Springfield Sage Lugana. And it was interesting because even when I was looking at it, because here comes the sun and the color, I looked at this and I went, I don't think I've got any of this colorway in my stash. So 28 count, which is not my ideal, but not bad. Color trumps count. So I looked at this and kind of went, I don't really have this. So this is kind of a gray green. I was going to look to see if I could come up with a DMC colorway equivalent, and I didn't do that. So I picked up what they had of this, added it to my stash, came home because I looked, you know, because I had my cell phone with me. I looked in my Xstitch app, and I knew that I didn't have anything in my inventory that said Springfield Sage. I've got some sage, and I came home and I looked at it, and it's like, so this is a different colorway. So I don't know where they got it from. I don't know if it's a new color or an old color that they still happen to have a piece of. but they had some. I looked at it and I went, I'm adding that to my stash. So again, this is 28 count Springfield Sage Lugana. And it does have the Zweigart stripe on the selvage. So again, who knows? But I certainly know that I came home and I didn't, went into my fabric stash and I went, I don't have this. I don't have any of this particular colorway. So I was very glad that I picked it up while I was there. So I picked up some charts while I was there. So this is Village Quaker by Jardin Privé. Okay, sun's coming out from behind a cloud. What can I say? Houses, blue, Quaker, a little bit of floral. That looked like me. The stitch count on this is 202 by 202. The called for fibers for this are DMC colors, so readily attainable. I will say, certainly for the Jardin Privé charts that I have in my collection, they are very good about generally. The called for fibers are DMC. So picked this up and you might understand why this plays into things. So this is from Bent Creek. So I'm adding a Bent Creek. This is called Quaker Easter Egg. I had actually seen this. I'm just looking to see. Is this a new one? There's no copyright on here that I can readily find. But I had seen this and kind of was thinking that I should get this. My LNS didn't have it in stock, and I was kind of like, you don't need to order it. We'll deal with it, you know, when the time comes and when I'm thinking about things to stitch for other Lent seasons. But when I was in the Craft Connection, they had this in stock, and I went, problem solved. So I bought this, brought it home. This is a small one, so 64 by 80, totally doable. So on 32 count, that would work out to a design size of about 4 inches by 5 inches. The called for fibers are a combination of Gentle Art and Weeks Dye Works, but they do provide DMC conversions as part of the chart. I'm just going to have a quick look. What did they... It doesn't say what they just say the model was stitched on 32 count linen. Over two thread linens with 2 strands. So they don't say what they stitched it on. I'm going to say it's probably a white antique white kind of thing. Anyway, happy with that. Glad that I've got it. I'm already looking going, there's probably going to be one design change on there, but we'll deal with that when that gets stitched. They also happen to have the May Quaker from the Heart Needle Arts by Wendy. She's doing a whole series this year, 1 a month, all Quakers. I really like this series. So January came out and I really liked it. But I went, don't jump on another series bandwagon until you see more of them. Like, you know, you can always come back and just do January, but I didn't want to have just sort of like some random January thing. February came out and I liked February. March came out, I liked March. At that point, I was placing an order with another shop as part of their Super Bowl special. I acknowledged they were having to order some things in for me. That one has not yet arrived yet. So I got the first 3 as part of that order. I'll show them to you when I get them. April and May have come out. They only had May, but I have now, we're 5 months in and I've liked all of them. And I've just said, okay, forget it. We're just going to get this series. So I'm going to pick them up periodically. Again, I picked this one up because I was in the store and they happened to have it. They didn't have April, and, you know, so be it. It's not like I'm going to be stitching them this year, so I'm going to pick them up periodically. I don't know if they've even released June yet, but you know, clearly I've got another 7 months of charts to go. The other chart that I picked up, and again, this totally had to do with a stitched model that was hanging on the wall. So, you know, I sort of wandered around the store, was getting ready to check out, and I said, do you happen to have the chart for that model over there, right over there? And again, if they didn't have it in stock, I wasn't going to order it with them. I was just going to, you know, for future reference, because it's not like I don't have anything to stitch. But she looked at it and she said, actually, I think we do have that in stock. And she went over and she picked it out. It says, it's called Porch Welcome by Imaginating. Now, yes, you can look at this and go, anyway, clearly change the color of this. So what they had is they changed the color of this. They did not stitch this in whatever color this is. Yeah. So DMC 841 and 3781. So the version that they had was actually stitched in green, and it was quite nice. And anytime you look at these, you sort of go, you can always change the color. And quite frankly, my plan for this is to change it into multiple colors. But the thing that got me is because they'd actually changed the words. So it did not say, welcome to the porch. It actually said, welcome to the deck. And as a friend of mine said, ooh, you could even change that to welcome to the sunroom or whatever I want to do. So I don't generally think of welcome to the porch. That's not, I don't really have one of those, and it's certainly not anywhere where anybody would hang out. I have a front step. Anyway, but so they'd actually changed this. And so the combination of the model stitch, the fact that they had changed the word is what put me over the edge, and they had it in stock, so it came home. So my plan for this is to change it into, I'm completely going to change the colorway. You know, I'm actually probably going to not do this as a monochromatic. I think I'm going to add more color to this. So check back later to see what I do with this. I don't think this is going in the 2022 stitching plan, but I think I am going to try to work it into the 5-year plan. Again, the model on the shop wall is what sold it. So added that into the stash. I was gonna say, and that's it, it's not it. The other thing that I picked up, so the Craft Connection also does framing. So you can take your framing into the shop. And at the back of the store, they actually had some existing ready-made frames that were on sale. So I don't know whether these are frames that people had ordered them and they didn't like them, or anyway, they're totally decent frames that aren't being used. So I don't know what the story is behind them. So I ended up picking up a frame. So it came with the glass. It is not non-glare, so it clearly is reflective. Congratulations, you get to see what's sitting across from me. So it is a silvery frame. So I wouldn't say it's like a gray silver. It's not. It's got a little more of a purpley tint to it. Anyway, but I liked it. It was nice and simple. So this is a long, narrow frame. See, candle holder, little vase, table. Anyway, so I picked this up. This again, so it's long and it's narrow. My plan for this is I'm thinking like one of the Mirabilias, like Raven Queen. I was looking at potentially, there's that Renaissance, no, Mystery Lady. Anyway, so as long as it's a long, narrow lady, she'll fit in here. Again, they had a couple of models that were up on the wall framed. And I kind of took this frame and sort of graciously held it up and went, what fits in here? How similar is this to this one and that one? So they had a couple of ones that were on the wall that I got to look and went, okay, I've got some options. So I don't know exactly what's going on in here, but it was a really good price for the frame. I like the frame, and it was a very simple decision where I was like, and you're coming home. Now, I will confess, on my way out the door, the lady had to say, I think you forgot your frame. Because this clearly was not on my things that I was inherently, when I was planning on going to the shop, that I was like, you know, high likelihood that I'm going to come home with a frame. That wasn't it. So even though I'd carried up to the front cupboard, I almost walked out of the store without it. All right. So those are my Stashquisitions from the Craft Connection. So there's a few other things that I want to talk about the store, because there are a few things about them that are unique to them. And again, I find that every LNS that I go into, regardless of where I am, has unique things about them. They're all different. They're all unique. They all do things that are different from, you know, the other LNSs. You know, okay, yes, I had to drive for several hours to get to Edmonton, so I don't know how local that is. And again, when I go traveling, to the extent that I have an opportunity, if there is an LNS on the ground, I try to get to them. So I'm very happy that I could add that to my trip to Edmonton while I was playing for a funeral, that I got to go to the Craft Connection. So couple of things. I want to tell a couple of stories about my experience there. So I had a very positive experience coming in. Clearly, I was someone who was not familiar to them, but you know, it was totally fine. I do want to say, like, there was a male stitcher in there. So he was in there. He was shopping for himself. It was like, you know, again, I don't know who any of these people are, so, you know, kudos to you. It was very nice seeing you, whoever you were. I liked seeing in the store. Well, glad that you're finding some enjoyment in stitching. He is working on the cottage garden sampling series that's new this year, in the woods, whatever that one is. You know, the one that has the fox, the swans, the raccoon, that one. So he was doing some kitting up for that while I was there. I do want to give a special shout out. Again, I don't know the name. There was an older lady in the shop. She was clearly the shopper, and she was sort of trying to hurry things up with whatever she was working on. And she kind of made a comment to the staff member that she was, you know, trying to finish up in a hurry, because she was there with her son. Her son had driven her into the shop, and so she just wanted to, you know, make the stop into the store efficient. And kudos to the son. You know, he was standing a ways over, so the mother was over here, the son is over here, and the son overheard what his mother said, and he's like, Mom, we are not in a rush. We are in no hurry. Take all the time you want. We are not in a rush. We can stay here as long as you want. And in my head, I went, you are such a good son. Thank you. So whoever he was, I'm 100% sure that he doesn't watch my Flosstube channel, because he's not the cross stitcher, but whoever he was, I just want to say thank you for being so nice to your mom, taking her to the cross stitch store, telling her that she didn't need to hurry, that you had all the time in the world for her to spend at the store to get what she was looking for. Thank you. I, as a person who don't know you at all, truly appreciated that you were generous with your time with your mom, and you were generous to sort of spend it in a shop. Clearly, I would say, didn't have really anything that appealed to you, which was totally fine. So thank you for being so nice to your mom and bringing her to the needlework shop. That was great. The other thing about the craft connection is, and again, it sort of plays into, each store develops sort of what it's carrying and what it's carrying more of based on its customer base. So I will say one of the things that is unique to the craft connection compared to the LNSs where I live is that they carry a much larger kit product line. They carry a lot more kits. Both of the LNSs near me, they have Mill Hill kits and they have decent selection of the Mill Hill kits, which of course the Craft Connection had, but they had a lot more in-stock kits of like dimension kits and bothy thread kits, and like they had a couple of different sections in the store that were devoted to kits. I did not spend a lot of time there because, as we all know, I'm not overly fond of kits, and certainly when I was getting to those areas of the store, I felt like I had enough things going on in my hands at that point in time. So I didn't spend a lot of time going through them. But if you're looking for a shop that may have some kits and you're looking for kits, I will absolutely say that the Craft Connection is an option for you. They do not have an online shop where you can sort of select the items and add them to your cart and pay for them. If you are looking to order from them, so they do mail order for sure. Welcome to the pandemic. I would say pretty much every store, if they didn't have a mail order business before, they certainly do now. So if you're looking for some options, you can reach out to them. You can phone them or you can email them, and I'm 100% sure that they would be happy to help you with whatever they've got. But like I say, they certainly have a much larger in-stock kit collection than my LNSs are where I live. And again, every store builds up what it's carrying based on what its customers are buying. So it was interesting to see. It was interesting to see how much more kits that they are carrying. From a fabric perspective, so I will say, welcome to supply chain issues. They had a decent amount of linen and Aidas in a variety of colors, but generally solid colors. So they didn't have a lot of hand-dyed fabric options in store. And I didn't ask them, but I would say welcome to the current times we're living in. It's a lot harder to get hand-dyed fabrics. So I wasn't surprised at that. Again, they had a decent selection of linens and Aidas in a variety of counts in solid colors available in store. The interesting thing to me was that they didn't, they clearly had some Luganas. They even had some Jobelin in there. I think they had a piece of black Jobelin, but I've already bought a piece of black Jobelin and I think I'm good to go for a bit. So certainly had some Luganas in stock. 28 count, a little bit of 25, and a lot. In 32 count, they really only had white, antique white, and opalescent white. So no color options in 32 count. Now, again, I did not talk to the staff about, why that was, or if they were waiting on a shipment, or, who knows what was going on there. Quite frankly, because I didn't have that kind of time. Their store hours on Saturdays are abbreviated, and of course I had to get to a funeral. Anyway, so I had a limited amount of time to do some things, so I didn't have that conversation with them about, why isn't your 32 count Lugana more robust, because that's my favorite count. And again, it's not my LNS, so, so be it. Anyway, had it interesting. I clearly still came home with some fabric, but that was there. Again, they had an interesting, they had a lot of the typical designers that you would see. They had the Jeanette Douglases and Just Nan and Mirabilias and Nora Corbett's and all that kind of stuff. If you were looking for sort of more of the reproduction samplers, a lot less selection of that. I don't recall seeing any like Hands Across the Sea samplers. I don't recall seeing those, but it could have been that I just was in a bit of a hurry and I didn't necessarily see all of it. You know, the new series, like they've got those Quaker months from the Heart. They have, you know, certainly we're carrying the Cottage Garden Samplings new series. Like the Nutcracker Village, they had, you know, they had a little area of, you know, charts that had just come in. So I certainly, that's where I got my May one from. You know, so they're regularly getting charts in and new things and all that kind of stuff. Again, not so much the sort of reproduction sampler type charts, sort of more of the more current version of things that are going on. Again, still some Just Nan, Jeanette Douglas's, you know, some Tiny Modernist, you know, that kind of stuff. So that was sort of the flavor of charts that they're carrying from a thread perspective. You know, Weeks, Classic Colorworks, Gentle Arts, Threadworks, Karen, the 3 series of Karen, Wildflowers, Watercolors, and Water Lilies. Again, that was the store that I was in where I checked out their Fiesta, went, not coming home with that one. Not that they didn't have it, they had it. I just went, wow, you are not the same as the colorway that I've got at home. You know, so they had all of those there, your standard Q snaps, stretcher bars, you know, they had, you know, a good selection of buttons and stuff like that. So if you're in the area or if you're heading to Edmonton for something, don't forget there is a local needlework shop that is up there and is open and has things in there. I'm sure they'll have something for everybody, including me, where I came home with a frame, which I wasn't expecting. That also brings me to another thing. So they do in-store framing. They actually had they keep some pictures of some of the stuff that they've already framed. So I am going to be adding some pictures in here. Again, I didn't ask them if I could take the pictures, but I took the pictures and I'm adding them in anyway. They had pictures of 4 different sampler stitches by the Drawn Thread that they had framed. So I kind of looked at it and I feel like maybe they were running a class. All of the dates on the samplers were the same year. So I kind of went, either they were doing it as a stitch along, they had a class, they had something going on. They had them done, and they'd framed these 4 different ones. And I looked at these 4 different pictures and went, you know, I changed my colors, but wow, I was not adventurous. So I'm going to add those 4 pictures in because I'm having to add them in after the fact, and I can't do sort of commentary above them. I'm going to put them in for a little bit longer than I would normally put the pictures in, so they're probably going to be up for about 7 seconds each. I would encourage you, if you have any interest in the sampler stitches, and certainly if you haven't started it yet, stop and have a look at these 4 pictures. So on one of them, they picked a variegated thread and took off from there and used that variegated thread to pick other complementary colors to use throughout their design, which I just looked at that and went like, I just did that for Jeanette's new one. Like, why didn't I think of that for sampler of stitches? Like, why didn't I? Anyway, I didn't. And we're too far along on round 2. I'm not going back. I'm okay with my choices. If you haven't started and you're looking at, and you want to look at some different ways, here they come. They also did things like, some of them, they added extra charms. So, for example, on A, this acorn here, one of the ladies, she didn't stitch the acorn, she actually put in a charm. So it was interesting seeing them. So they've again, so some of them, they've added different charms in different places, and it was really interesting to see. There's one that is, I would say that is a color palette that is more similar to what I've chosen. So I feel like they sort of took the original color palette and brightened it up, as did I. The other one, it's more of a purple palette. So again, it was just fascinating to see. You know, it was very interesting for me because I'm currently working on the sampler stitches. So it was really interesting to see what they did. I was looking at them again, either Friday, Saturday. I think it was Friday night. I was looking at the pictures again. It was interesting because for H, on the pattern I've got, there's a hand that is outlined. But in all of these frame samples that I've got pictures of, they've changed it into something else. So I'm back on, I'm going to have to reach out to somebody again and go, in the new version, is there a different stitch that goes in where that hand is? I'll have to check on the Drawn Thread site itself to see if they're showing it with something else. I just found it interesting because consistently on all 4 of these in the letter H, there is a different stitch where the hand is. None of these 4 examples have the hand stitched. And I'm not smart enough to be able to look at that picture and go, what is that stitch? And again, I didn't have the time to sort of chat with the store owner about what was going on there. But I thought it was absolutely fascinating. So I'm going to insert those pictures here. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. And the last thing that I want to talk about is their Instagram account and their tutorials. So they have a really great Instagram account. I have been following their Instagram account for quite some time. If nothing else, I would highly encourage you to follow their Instagram account. Their Instagram account keeps you up to date. It tells you when they get new shipments in. You know, so as I was heading up, I kind of went, well, if nothing else, I know that they just got a big Hoffman order in. Like, I think the Hoffman order came into them on like Wednesday. And I was like, I'm traveling up on Saturday. They should have some stuff there for me to see. They also show what they're framing. So what's on their framing table, what I think it's great. So you get to see what people are stitching. You get to see how they're framing them. I think those are fantastic as well. They also have these tutorials about finishing options, and they are really great. I know I am terrible about turning a lot of my stuff into fully finished object, but there are a number of their tutorials. So they put tutorials on their Instagram account. They also put tutorials onto their website. They're not one for one. So some are on their website. Some of them are on the Instagram account. The ones on the Instagram are not videos, but they are sort of step-by-step pictures as they are walking through their finishing of said project. So their finishing tend to be sort of more like flat folds and cube finishes and pillow things, and like I know they're on their website, they've got how to make tassels, and so that's kind of what the finishing tutorials are about. The thing that I like about them is that they are walking you through step-by-step. They're actually also showing you exactly what they're using. So for example, if they're saying on this particular project, however we're finishing it, we are using interfacing, and they show you the package of interfacing that they're using. So while you may not have the exact same thing where you are, at least you have the information from the packaging to see what they're using. So I love that because they tend to have sort of like, here are the materials that we gathered together that we're using for this particular type of finishing. So, which is why I save those on my Instagram account so I can go back to them and go, one of these days when I start to do some fully finished objects, you know, I've got some tutorials there. They show you their tools. You know, they'll say you don't necessarily need to have this tool, you know, because they do some soft pressing, you know, so they show you the tool that they're using. I looked at them and go, okay, well, I don't necessarily have one of those myself. My mom, who's a quilter, does. So at least, you know, if we ever get to that point where I'm fully finishing it, I'm going to go to mom's. I'm going to have my Instagram account. I'll use her tools, and, you know, hopefully we can get something pulled together one of these days. But they've got great, great, great tutorials. There's a lot of their tutorials where I've actually saved them to sort of say, one of these days you need to come back and fully finish some objects. And they've got step-by-step instructions. One of the recent ones that they showed on their Instagram account, which I thought was really interesting, it's not necessarily a design that I would choose to do, but I thought what they did with this particular pattern was fantastic. So it's a chart by It's So Emma, and I forget, here's how great I am. I forget what the name of it is. It's one of the newer ones, and it's got that apron thing and some kitchen related items on it. So it's a larger chart. They've stitched it up and finished it as a cube. A cube. And you may be going, great, if it's this big chart, what are they doing? So they've actually taken various of the motifs from this chart, made sure that they were all the same size, and have stitched them up and finished it as a cube. So if you looked at that chart and went, I don't want to have this big thing that needs framing or, you know, hanging as a banner, or however you're going to choose to finish it, you still have the option of taking elements of that chart and finishing it into something smaller. I thought it was brilliant. It was a brilliant, like, I would never have looked at that chart and went, ooh, I can do that. I can do a cube finish with that. Like, it never would have occurred to me. So I thought it was absolutely brilliant. I will put a picture of that in here as well. So there's the cube finish of that It's So Emma chart. Again, I just thought it was brilliant. So it speaks to the level of their creativity about how they're approaching things. I thought it was fantastic. So if nothing else, I strongly encourage you to follow them on Instagram and see what they're doing, because you may learn a few things and have some creative ideas as to how you can finish something else. So really enjoyed my time at the Craft Connection. The next time I get up to Edmonton, I will for sure be stopping in. It was a very pleasurable experience. Like I say, the people were great. I enjoyed seeing the male stitcher in there. The sun was just great. I loved seeing the framing things, the things that they had framed. Even just flipping through that book was fantastic. Like I say, I just sat when I got there and went, oh my goodness, they've got 4 pictures of framed sampler stitches that are all different. I was in high heaven. It was fantastic. Again, so that was my trip to the Craft Connection. I had a great time. So I'm grateful I got to go play for a funeral in Edmonton, because it meant that I got to stop by the Craft Connection as well. And with that, here we're at the end of another long video. So I hope you've enjoyed what you've seen. As always, thinking about the people of the Ukraine. Anyway, thoughts and prayers with the Ukraine, for sure. And as always, at the end of my line, you know what my line is. I hope you're all staying safe. I hope you're all staying healthy. And I hope you're all finding some time to stitch. As always, happy to have questions, comments, suggestions for topics. Love to have the conversation going in the comment section below. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Take care, guys.